They pulled my daughter out of the ocean 3 hours after she went over the railing. She was still breathing, barely. Her skin was a gray-blue color I didn't know a living person could turn. Her lips were purple. There was blood in her hair from where her head had struck something on the way down. A Coast Guard medic looked at me and said words I will never forget. "Sir, she's alive, but it's gonna be close." That was the moment I made the phone call to my older brother. I said only 4 words. It's time to end them. But to understand why I said that, you need to know what happened on that yacht. My name is Robert Sullivan. I'm 65 years old, a retired architect. I spent 40 years designing buildings meant to stand for generations, schools, hospitals, libraries. I understood foundations. I understood stability. What I didn't understand was how easily powerful people believe they can throw a human life away and never answer for it. That night, my daughter Emily and I were guests aboard a luxury yacht called the Serafina. It belonged to the Whitmore family, old money, political power, the kind of people you see on television shaking hands while patriotic music plays in the background. We were anchored off Martha's Vineyard for their annual autumn party. Soft jazz, champagne glasses, lights reflecting on black water. From a distance, it looked elegant. I didn't know yet that it was where my daughter's life would almost end. Emily had married Marcus Whitmore 2 years earlier. He was handsome, polished, well-spoken, a hedge fund manager, raised to believe the world owed him comfort. His father, Senator Charles Whitmore, had the kind of calm voice that made people trust him without knowing why. I never fully trusted either of them, but Emily loved him. And when you're a father who raised his daughter alone after her mother died, you learn to swallow certain fears if it means protecting her happiness. I had raised Emily by myself since she was 8 years old. There had never been a day of her life I wasn't there to protect her, except this one. That night she wore a navy dress. She stayed near the railing most of the evening, resting her hands gently over her stomach. She had told Marcus that morning that she was pregnant. She told me his reaction had been strange, not happy, not angry, just cold. Around 10 p.m., most of the guests went below deck for dinner. I stayed outside talking with an elderly couple when I heard Marcus call out to her, "Emily, come here a second." I turned. Marcus and his father was standing near the stern railing. Emily walked toward them smiling, the way she always did when she was trying to keep the peace. I couldn't hear what Marcus said, but I saw her smile fade. She shook her head. She tried to step back. That's when Marcus grabbed her arm. My stomach dropped. I started walking toward them. "Let go of me," Emily said. Her voice was rising now. Senator Whitmore stepped closer, blocking her from the other side. They had her cornered between them and the railing. I started moving faster, then running, a 65-year-old man in dress shoes trying to cross a yacht fast enough to stop something he could already feel coming. "Get away from her," I shouted. I was too far away, too slow. I saw Marcus glance at his father. Some silent understanding passed between them. Then they both pushed. Emily went backward over the railing. Her scream cut off when her head struck something hard before she hit the water. That sound, I still hear it when I try to sleep. I reached the railing seconds later and looked down into nothing but black water. No movement, no splash, just darkness. "She'll be fine," the senator said behind me, calm, controlled. "People fall overboard all the time." "She's pregnant," I yelled. Marcus shook his head like she had embarrassed him. "She's overreacting," he said. I grabbed the life preserver and threw it into the darkness, even though I couldn't see where it landed. My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped my phone when I called 911. I screamed coordinates into it like a man who had already lost everything. Behind me, Marcus walked away like nothing had happened. I stood at that railing for nearly an hour, screaming my daughter's name into black water. I remember thinking, this is not how a father is supposed to lose his child. Not like this, not in the dark. When the Coast Guard finally found her, one of the officers shouted back to his team, "Alive! Barely!" They lifted her out in a rescue basket. She didn't look human anymore.
As they loaded her into the helicopter, a Coast Guard officer turned to me and said something that changed everything. "Sir, this is a crime scene now. We need your statement." I watched the helicopter carry my daughter away toward the hospital, and I realized something. If I left with her, Marcus and his father would control the story. So I stayed, and I told the Coast Guard exactly what I saw, every word, every detail. By the time I reached the hospital 3 hours later, their lawyers were already there, waiting. I stood in the ICU hallway, took out my phone, and called the one man I knew who understood how powerful men fall when they think they're untouchable. He answered. I said 4 words: "It's time to end them." But to understand why I said that, you need to know what happened on that yacht.
When I reached the hospital, the Whitmore's lawyers were already there. 3 of them. Dark suits, calm faces, clipboards in hand like this was a business meeting instead of my daughter fighting for her life upstairs. One of them stepped toward me before I even reached the elevator. "Mr. Sullivan, we're very sorry for the accident." Accident. I hadn't even spoken yet, and they had already named it. I didn't reply. I just stared at him long enough to make him uncomfortable. "I want to see my daughter," I said. "She's in surgery," he replied smoothly. "Head trauma. The doctors are optimistic." Optimistic. That word didn't belong in this hallway. I stepped into the elevator and finally felt my legs begin to shake, not from fear, from rage I was trying to keep contained. Emily was in surgery for nearly 4 hours. When the doctor came out, his expression told me everything before he spoke. "She's alive," he said, "but she's in a coma, severe concussion, internal bleeding, hypothermia from the water. We won't know the full extent until she wakes up." "If she wakes up," I said. He didn't answer. That silence said enough. I sat beside her bed in the ICU for most of the night, machines breathing for her, tubes everywhere, her face swollen, bandage around her head. I kept looking at her stomach, thinking about the baby. Around 3 a.m., a police officer came into the room. Not a detective, a uniform, young, nervous. "Mr. Sullivan, I just need to clarify a few things about your statement." I nodded. He looked down at his notepad. "So you're saying Senator Whitmore and his son pushed her intentionally?" "Yes." He hesitated. "They're saying she leaned back too far while arguing and lost her balance." I stared at him. "She had bruises on both arms from where he grabbed her," I said. He wrote that down, but didn't look convinced. That was the first moment I understood what I was really up against. This wasn't going to be a normal investigation. By morning, the news had already started reporting it. "Falls from yacht in Martha's Vineyard accident." Accident. Marcus had already given a statement. So had the senator. They said Emily had been emotional lately, stressed, that she slipped, that I panicked and misinterpreted what I saw. I hadn't slept in nearly 30 hours, and already the story was being rewritten while my daughter lay unconscious. At 9 a.m., my phone rang. My brother. "I'm on my way," he said. "Don't talk to anyone else." He arrived 2 hours later. Gray hair, old leather jacket, the same calm eyes he had when we were kids and he used to stop bullies without raising his voice. He walked into the ICU, looked at Emily, and his jaw tightened. "Tell me everything," he said. I did. Every second of it. He didn't interrupt once. When I finished, he nodded slowly. "They've already started protecting themselves," he said, "which means they know exactly what they did." He stepped into the hallway and made 2 calls I wasn't allowed to hear. When he came back, his tone had changed. "This is bigger than a local police report now," he said. That was when he finally told me what he had done for 30 years. He had been an FBI investigator, specializing in political corruption, and he knew exactly how men like the Whitmores avoided prison. "But they made one mistake," he said. "What?" I asked. "They did this in front of you." For the first time since the ocean, I felt something other than helplessness. Hope. Then he said something that made my blood run cold. "They're going to try to make Emily look unstable before she wakes up."
And by the end of that day, they had already started. If you think the fall into the ocean was the worst thing they did, you haven't seen how far powerful people will go to protect themselves.
By the second day, I understood the pattern. Nothing the Whitmores did was loud. Everything was quiet, polite, legal, which made it harder to fight. When I arrived at the hospital that morning, a nurse I hadn't seen before was standing outside Emily's room with a clipboard. "Immediate family only," she said gently. "I am her father." She checked the paper again. "I'm sorry, sir. Her husband left specific instructions." My brother stepped forward. "Show me the paperwork." She hesitated, then handed it over. Marcus had filed a temporary medical directive at 6:12 a.m. It stated that due to Emily's history of emotional instability, all medical decisions were to go through him. Emotional instability. My brother exhaled slowly through his nose. "They're building a narrative," he said quietly. "Fast." We went downstairs to speak with hospital administration. By the time we got there, a man in a suit was already waiting. Another Whitmore lawyer. He smiled like this was a misunderstanding between neighbors. "Mr. Sullivan, no one is trying to keep you from your daughter. We're just following proper legal procedure." Proper. Legal. Words that sound harmless until they're used against you. My brother leaned closer to me and whispered, "Don't argue. Let him talk." So I listened, and the more the lawyer spoke, the clearer the plan became. They were laying groundwork, not for what happened on the yacht, but for what they would say happened in Emily's mind. "She had been under a lot of stress," the lawyer said. "Pregnancy can affect emotions. Marcus was concerned about her well-being." Concerned. I felt my hands shaking again, not from fear, from the effort of not grabbing this man by his collar. We went back upstairs. This time, my brother made a phone call from the hallway. 10 minutes later, the hospital administrator returned with us personally and overruled the restriction. I didn't ask who my brother had called. I didn't need to. When I entered Emily's room, I noticed something new. Her wrists had faint red marks, not from the fall, from restraints. I looked at the nurse. She was moving earlier, agitated. We had to secure her so she wouldn't pull the tubes. Agitated. My brother's jaw tightened. "They're documenting everything," he said quietly. "Every movement, every reaction, so later they can say she was unstable." I sat beside her and took her hand. "Emily," I said softly, "Dad's here." She didn't move, but I kept talking anyway, because I didn't want the first voice she heard, if she woke up, to be theirs. By afternoon, the story on the news had changed again. Now it wasn't just an accident. It was, "Sources say the woman may have leaned back during a heated argument and lost balance." Sources. I knew exactly where those sources lived. That evening, my brother came back from a long walk outside the hospital. "I've been making calls," he said. "To who?" "Old people who owe me favors." He sat down across from me. "They're not just trying to win a case. They're trying to destroy her credibility before she can speak." I felt something cold settle in my chest. What happens if she wakes up and they don't believe her? My brother looked at me steadily. "Then we make sure they have no choice." That was the first time he said we. Not you, not her. We. Later that night, a social worker came into the room. She introduced herself kindly and asked if Emily had a history of depression. I stared at her. "Who told you that?" "It's in the preliminary notes from her husband." Of course it was. I realized then, this wasn't panic, this wasn't chaos, this was a strategy, a careful, practiced, well-funded strategy, and they had started it before the helicopter even landed. I stepped into the hallway and felt the weight of it all press down on me. They weren't just trying to escape what they did, they were trying to rewrite who my daughter was, and if they succeeded, then even if she woke up, no one would believe her. I went back into the room and sat beside her again. I leaned close to her ear. "Hold on," I whispered. "Just hold on." Because now I understood something very clearly. The fall into the ocean
was only the beginning. What they were doing in this hospital was quieter, cleaner, and far more dangerous. If you think money and power stop at lawyers and press statements, you haven't seen how they reshape the truth itself.
By the third day, exhaustion had started to blur the hours together. Hospital light has a way of making time meaningless. Morning looks like night, night feels endless. But my brother was sharper than ever. He hadn't slept more than a few minutes at a time, yet his mind was working like it had 30 years ago. Watching, waiting, looking for the one thing powerful people always forget. Their confidence makes them careless. That afternoon, he asked me a question that seemed strange. Where exactly were you standing when they pushed her? I closed my eyes and pictured it. The starboard side, near the stern railing, about 15 feet from the outdoor bar. He nodded slowly. And there were guests outside with you? Yes, an elderly couple from Connecticut. We were talking about their grandchildren. He stood up immediately. Good, he said. Very good. I didn't understand why until an hour later when he came back holding his phone. They already gave statements, he said. Both of them. My heart dropped. What did they say? They said they saw Marcus grab Emily's arm. I felt something shift inside my chest. Not relief, something stronger. Validation. But here's the part the Whitmores don't know yet, my brother continued. The husband wears hearing aids that connect to his phone. I stared at him. And he uses an app that automatically records conversations around him so he can replay them later if he misses something. I stood up so fast my chair slid backward. You're saying they recorded the entire argument. For the first time since the ocean, my hands weren't shaking. They were steady. Do they know what they have? I asked. Not yet, he said. They just thought it was an argument. They haven't listened to it carefully. That was when I understood. The Whitmores thought this was their world, their rules, their narrative. But they had made the one mistake arrogant people always make. They assumed no one ordinary could hurt them. That evening, we met the couple in a quiet corner of the hospital cafeteria. They were kind, shaken, apologetic that they hadn't realized how serious it was. The husband pulled out his phone with trembling hands. I remember thinking it sounded heated, he said. I saved it in case someone asked later. He pressed play. The audio was scratchy, filled with wind and distant music, but the voices were clear. Emily, you're hurting me. Let go. Marcus, stop being dramatic. The senator's voice. Enough of this. Then Emily again, louder. Don't touch me. And then a scuffle, a thud, her scream cutting off. Silence. I closed my eyes. My brother didn't. He listened like a man cataloging evidence. When it finished, he looked at the couple and said calmly, "Do not share this with anyone, not yet." They nodded. Back in Emily's room, he finally allowed himself to sit down. "They're done," he said quietly. "Not yet," I replied. He looked at me. "Why?" "Because she hasn't woken up." He nodded slowly. "You're right. Because this wasn't just about proving what happened. This was about making sure when Emily opened her eyes, the world already knew the truth." An hour later, my brother stepped into the hallway and made another call. This time, I heard part of it. "Yes," he said, "I have something you're going to want to hear, and no, this can't be buried." When he came back, his expression had changed again. Calm, certain. Tomorrow morning, this stops being their story. I looked at my daughter, still motionless in the hospital bed, machines breathing for her. And for the first time, I didn't feel helpless. I felt something else, the beginning of consequences. If you think the Whitmores were prepared for a police report, they were not prepared for what was about to come next.
The next morning,
My brother was gone before I woke up in the chair beside Emily's bed. He had left a note on the small hospital table. Today it changes. I didn't know what he meant until my phone started vibrating around 9:30 a.m. Missed calls, news alerts, messages from numbers I didn't recognize. I turned on the TV mounted in the corner of the room, and there it was. Not a small headline, not a quiet article buried online, a live news segment. Exclusive audio raises questions in Martha's Vineyard yacht incident. They played part of the recording, not all of it, just enough. Emily's voice. "You're hurting me. Let go." Marcus. "Stop being dramatic." Then the struggle, then the scream. The news anchor stopped the clip there, but it was enough. The word accident disappeared from every report within hours. By noon, the story had changed everywhere. Possible assault at sea involving Senator's family. By 1 p.m., 2 detectives arrived at the hospital, asking for me. Not a uniform, not a nervous kid with a notepad, real investigators. They asked me to repeat my statement again. This time, they didn't question it. They wrote it down carefully, respectfully. At 3 p.m., the hospital hallway filled with a different kind of energy. Reporters, cameras outside, whispers among staff. The Whitmore's lawyers were back, but they didn't look calm anymore. They looked rushed, worried. For the first time since that night, they were reacting instead of controlling. Around 5 p.m., my brother returned. He didn't say a word at first. He just handed me his phone. A news alert. Police confirm active criminal investigation into Whitmore family incident. I looked at him. He nodded once. "They didn't expect evidence," he said. "They expected your word against theirs." That evening, something happened I had been praying for since the ocean. My Emily's fingers moved, just slightly. A nurse noticed before I did. Then her eyes fluttered, slowly, painfully, but she woke up. I leaned forward so fast I almost knocked over the IV stand. "Emily," I said, "I'm here." She looked confused, weak, disoriented, but she recognized me. Tears rolled down the sides of her face into the pillow. Her first whisper was barely audible. "Dad." I held her hand carefully, afraid to hurt her. "You're safe," I told her. "They can't hurt you anymore." And for the first time since that railing, I knew that was true. Because now it wasn't just me. It wasn't just my brother. It wasn't just a statement. It was evidence. It was attention. It was the world watching. Within 2 days, warrants were issued. Marcus Whitmore was arrested first. His father followed the next morning. No speeches, no press conferences, just quiet handcuffs and lowered heads as cameras flashed. The same cameras they had used their entire lives to build their image were now recording their fall. A week later, Emily told investigators everything from her hospital bed. Every word matched the recording. Every detail matched my statement. They had tried to erase her before she could speak, but they failed. Because they made one mistake. They thought no one ordinary could hurt them. They were wrong. I still sit beside Emily most days while she recovers. She will heal. The baby is safe. And every time I look at her, I remember that night, the black water, the silence, the moment I thought I had lost her forever, and the phone call I made in the ICU hallway. It's time to end them. I didn't know then how it would happen. I just knew it had to. And it did. If this story moved you, make sure to subscribe to the channel. Stories like this remind us that truth still matters. Leave a comment with your city. I read every one.